In 2008, Nokia sold nearly 2 out of every 5 mobile phones on Earth. By 2013, its phone empire was gone, sold off in desperation for a fraction of its former value. Nokia. How the world's largest phone maker lost it all isn't a story of bad luck. It's a warning about what happens when unstoppable dominance blinds leaders to disaster. How did a company this powerful fall so fast? The answer begins where Nokia least expected it. On January 9, 2007, the lights dimmed in San Francisco's Moscone Center. Steve Jobs stepped onto the stage and, with a few words and a flick of his finger, changed the future of mobile phones. The iPhone wasn't just another gadget. It was a touchscreen slab with no keyboard, no stylus, and a glossy glass face. It looked fragile. It was expensive. Yet Jobs promised it would put the internet, music, and calls in your pocket, all through a single device. The crowd erupted. The tech press called it revolutionary. But halfway around the world in Espoo, Finland, the mood was almost bored. Inside Nokia's headquarters, executives watched the keynote and saw only problems. The iPhone's battery life wouldn't last a day. Its screen would crack. It was priced for luxury buyers, not the mass market that Nokia dominated. In interviews, Nokia leaders brushed off the iPhone as a curiosity, a device for gadget lovers, not for the billions who relied on their sturdy, affordable phones. Industry analysts recall the tone. Apple didn't understand mobile. Nokia's hardware supply chains, global reach, and relentless production cycles seemed untouchable. The company had sold 472 million phones in 2008 alone, nearly 40% of all mobile phones worldwide. No competitor, not even Apple, had ever come close. Early analyst reports echoed Nokia's skepticism. Many predicted the iPhone would sell well in the US, but fail in Europe and Asia, where Nokia's brand was king. The iPhone was labeled a luxury product, unlikely to threaten Nokia's core business. Even as news outlets replayed Jobs' demo and marveled at pinch-to-zoom and visual voicemail, Nokia's leadership stayed the course. They saw the iPhone's flaws, not its potential. They missed that Apple wasn't just selling a phone. It was building a software ecosystem, one that would soon draw in developers, carriers, and customers worldwide. That moment, when Jobs unveiled the iPhone and Nokia shrugged, was more than a missed warning. It was the first crack in the armor of a giant who believed it was immune to disruption. The world was pivoting to software, but inside Nokia's boardrooms, the old rules still seemed to apply. The revolution had arrived, and the most powerful phone company on Earth barely blinked. Deep inside Nokia's research labs, the mood was nothing like the calm confidence shown upstairs. Engineers huddled over code, running late-night tests on Symbian, already seeing the cracks. The system that powered hundreds of millions of phones was never built for touchscreens, or for the kind of seamless, app-driven experience the iPhone promised. Attempts to modernize it led to endless workarounds, patching old code instead of building something new. Frustration grew as engineers watched rivals leap ahead while their own warnings went unheeded. Speaking up came with real risk. A single negative report could end a career. Middle managers, under pressure to deliver only good news, filtered out the problems. Internal memos painted a rosy picture. Symbian was on track, innovation was thriving, and Nokia's next phone would wow the market. In reality, the engineering teams were overwhelmed. Bug lists grew longer, release schedules slipped, and every new device seemed to require its own custom version of the operating system. By 2011, more than half of Symbian's 2,800 engineers were tied up maintaining old code and testing dozens of device-specific branches, leaving little time for real innovation. Meetings between technical leads and executives often ended in silence. When engineers tried to explain that Symbian couldn't compete with iOS or Android, their concerns were brushed aside. Some described the company as a Soviet-style bureaucracy, where the safest path was to agree with the plan, no matter how flawed. Honest feedback was rare. Fear of blame, fear of losing bonuses, fear of being sidelined. These pressures shaped every conversation. The consequences went beyond slow progress. Nokia's App Store, Ovi, was hamstrung by the fragmentation of Symbian. Developers faced a maze of incompatible devices, each needing its own version of an app. By mid-2011, nearly 40% of Symbian developers had abandoned the platform. Inside Nokia, the engineers who best understood the looming disaster found themselves isolated, their warnings lost in a sea of optimism. The real problems never reached the people with the power to act. The world outside was changing fast, but inside Nokia, fear kept the truth locked away. Symbian began as Nokia's secret weapon, but by the late 2000s, it had become a maze of tangled code and competing priorities. Originally designed for simple keypads and tiny screens, Symbian wasn't built for the wave of touch devices or rapid-fire feature launches that followed the iPhone. As demand grew for more diverse phones, slide, flip, touch, business, camera-centric, Nokia's teams responded by forking the codebase again and again. Each new flagship, each carrier request, each regional customization created another branch. By 2011, the Symbian tree had dozens of persistent forks, each one drifting further from the others, each one demanding its own bug fixes, testing, and support. This fragmentation wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an anchor. Every time a hardware team wanted a new camera feature or a custom keyboard layout, they'd carve out a fresh branch. Major carriers insisted on their own builds, and Asian OEM partners layered on their tweaks. Internal mandates allowed device teams to fork the code to hit deadlines, but rarely required them to merge changes back. The result? A sprawling forest of variants, many of them incompatible at the binary level. For the engineers, it meant endless meetings about what could be merged and what had to be rewritten from scratch. The cost of this chaos was staggering. By 2011, Nokia had more than 2,800 engineers assigned to Symbian, but estimates suggest that 50 to 70% of their time was spent on maintenance and quality assurance for old branches. Each device line, N, E, X series, C series, had its own dedicated test teams, all running the same test cases, all rediscovering the same bugs, all racing to patch issues that had already been fixed elsewhere. Release cycles, once nimble, stretched to 9 or even 12 months per variant. By contrast, Android OEMs were turning out new models in as little as 3 to 6 months, and Apple kept a single source branch for all iPhones, delivering near-universal app compatibility on a predictable annual schedule. The duplication didn't stop at testing. Bug trackers filled with reports of issues fixed in one branch, but left to fester in others. Developers faced a moving target. An app that worked on one Symbian device might fail on another, thanks to subtle differences in hardware support or firmware. The Ovi Store, Nokia's answer to the App Store, suffered from this unpredictability. Developers, already frustrated by the maze of device requirements, abandoned the platform in droves. By mid-2011, nearly 40% of Symbian developers had quit or were planning to leave. Inside Nokia, some engineers called it death by 1,000 builds. With every new phone, the maintenance burden grew heavier. The best minds were trapped in a cycle of endless bug triage and regression testing, unable to focus on new features or future platforms. The company's technical debt ballooned, and the pace of true innovation slowed to a crawl. As the world raced ahead, Nokia's engineering horsepower was spent just keeping the old machinery running. The cost of fragmentation was measured in missed opportunities, and eventually, in market share lost forever. While Symbian was eating up resources and morale, another project was taking shape in the shadows. A project that, for a brief moment, offered Nokia a way out. Deep inside the company, A small team of designers and engineers worked on something called MeeGo. Unlike Symbian, MeeGo was built for the future, a Linux-based platform designed from the ground up for touchscreens with a clean, modern architecture. It wasn't a patchwork of legacy code. It was fast, fluid, and open to developers in a way Symbian never could be. The team behind MeeGo poured their creativity into a device that would become a legend among tech enthusiasts, the Nokia N9. When the N9 launched in 2011, it stunned critics. The phone's gesture-based swipe interface let users navigate with a simple flick of the thumb. No buttons, no clutter, just pure interaction. Reviewers called it the best smartphone Nokia ever made, and some even compared its elegance to the iPhone. The hardware was just as impressive. A smooth, polycarbonate shell, curved Gorilla Glass, and a camera that rivaled the best on the market. For a moment, it looked like Nokia had found its answer. But inside the company, hope was already running out. The MeeGo team fought for resources, but executive attention was elsewhere. After months of infighting, shifting priorities, and boardroom debates, the decision landed. MeeGo would not be Nokia's future. The N9 was released in only a handful of countries, with no promise of follow-ups. Engineers watched as their work was sidelined in favor of a new strategy, one that would tie Nokia's fate to Windows Phone. The cancellation didn't come because MeeGo failed in the market. It came from the top, out of fear that supporting multiple platforms would fragment the company even further. Some inside Nokia believed MeeGo could have been their Android, a flexible, modern platform that could power everything from budget phones to high-end flagships. Others, burned by years of fragmentation, saw it as just another risk. The MeeGo team's warnings and pleas, like those of the Symbian engineers before them, were lost in the noise of corporate politics. Years later, the N9 is still remembered as a glimpse of what Nokia could have been. Its gesture-driven interface would show up in later versions of iOS and Android. But for Nokia, the opportunity slipped away. The company had innovation in its hands, but a culture of fear and rivalry kept it from ever reaching the world at scale. What was meant to be a new beginning became, instead, a final act of defiance. A phone that proved Nokia could still lead, if only it had the courage to follow through. Stephen Elop arrived at Nokia in 2010, a Canadian outsider with a mandate to stop the bleeding. Within months, he sent a memo to every employee, a document that would become infamous inside the company and across the tech world. He wrote, "We are standing on a burning platform." The memo described a man trapped by fire on an oil rig, forced to jump into freezing water to survive. Elop's message was blunt. Clinging to old habits meant certain death. The competition wasn't just selling better devices, they were building entire ecosystems, and Nokia was falling further behind with every passing quarter. Elop didn't hold back. He called out the slow pace of innovation, the endless delays, and the company's inability to deliver a product that could rival the iPhone or Android. The first iPhone shipped in 2007, and we still don't have a product that is close to their experience, he wrote. Android, he pointed out, had overtaken Nokia in smartphone sales in just 2 years. Inside Nokia, the memo landed like a shockwave. For years, bad news had been buried under layers of bureaucracy and optimism. Now, the crisis was spelled out in black and white for all to see. But when it came time to choose a path forward, Elop made a decision that stunned the industry. On February 11, 2011, Nokia announced it would abandon its own software and partner exclusively with Microsoft. Every Nokia smartphone would now run Windows Phone. The move was billed as a bold leap, a way to differentiate from the sea of Android devices. But for many inside and outside the company, it felt like a desperate gamble. Windows Phone was an unknown, with far fewer apps and almost no momentum in the market. The Android option, which could have made Nokia instantly competitive, was rejected outright. The company's leadership, still clinging to the idea that Nokia should set trends, not follow them, chose to bet everything on a third ecosystem. The burning platform memo was supposed to spark a turnaround. Instead, it triggered confusion and panic. Developers, partners, and employees watched as years of work on Symbian and MeeGo were swept aside. The shock therapy had exposed the rot, but the cure was untested, and the clock was ticking. By 2012, the numbers told a story that could no longer be spun. Nokia reported a staggering loss of 4.9 billion euros, its first annual loss in 2 decades. The world's former leader in mobile phones was bleeding cash, watching its reserves shrink quarter after quarter as customers turned away from Windows-powered Lumias and clung to iPhones and Androids. The company's global market share, once nearly 40%, had dropped below 5%. In just 5 years, Nokia's mobile division had gone from unrivaled titan to a distant memory in the smartphone race. Inside the boardroom, the mood was grim. The directors faced a choice: continue fighting a battle they had already lost, or salvage what they could from the wreckage. After months of internal debate and mounting pressure from shareholders, the board made its decision. On September 3, 2013, Nokia announced it would sell its entire mobile phone business to Microsoft for $7.2 billion. The deal included the transfer of 32,000 employees, the company's device and services unit, and the remnants of a once mighty brand. Chairman Risto Siilasmaa delivered the verdict in a brief, measured statement. After a thorough assessment of how to maximize shareholder value, including detailed consideration of the full range of options, the Nokia board of directors believes this transaction is the best path forward for Nokia and its shareholders. The words were careful, but the reality was plain. The empire had fallen, not with a dramatic crash, but with a quiet, calculated surrender. The sale price, just $7.2 billion, was less than a tenth of what Nokia's mobile business had been worth at its peak. For Finland, the news landed like a funeral bell. Factories shuttered, towns that had grown around Nokia's success faced mass layoffs, and an entire generation of engineers saw their life's work handed off to a foreign company. The world's largest phone maker, once a symbol of national pride and technological prowess, had been reduced to a line item on Microsoft's balance sheet. The numbers left no room for doubt. Nokia's fate was sealed. In 2008, Nokia sold 472 million phones, controlling nearly 39% of the global market. Just 5 years later, its mobile phone division was sold to Microsoft for $7.2 billion, a loss of over 90% in value. The documentary has shown how a culture of fear and missed warnings about software innovation led to strategic paralysis, with Symbian's fragmentation and MeeGo's cancellation sealing Nokia's fate. Stephen Elop's 2011 Burning Platform memo marked a last-ditch pivot, but Windows Phone's limited ecosystem failed to revive the company. Some internal deliberations and executive decisions remain undocumented, leaving open questions about what more could have been done. Today, Nokia's story is studied in business schools as a cautionary example. Even the most dominant companies can fall if they ignore fundamental shifts in technology and culture. The facts are clear. Nokia's collapse was not inevitable, but it was preventable.
Thanks for watching. If you love deep tech stories like this, make sure to subscribe for more untold tech histories. See you in the next one.